Hello, everyone. Welcome back to CFS Summit 2022, Render the Phygital Reality. My name is Enrique Menendez, Editor-in-Chief at CFS, and your host for this year's summit. Today is day 2 fashion, the new look now in Web3, and we are so excited to welcome all of you with us in VR at the Grand Palais Ephemer, the Spin Metaverse. Our topic for this conversation is, who are they designing digital humans? Our panel moderator is Bethany Ryder, Metaverse Editor at Jing Daily, and our speakers include Sarah Glusto, producer at All Inc., David Robert, Director of HRI at Boston Dynamics, Violaine Gressier, Global Industry Head of Luxury and Beauty at Meta, and Greg McNamara, Principal Designer at Mojo Vision. At CFS, we define fashion as a creative reflection of the ethos of the time, a medium that is constantly changing and has a responsibility to represent society. It's diverse, innovative, and circular in Web3. A century ago, and maybe even 50 years ago, this definition would have been quite different. It probably would have sounded something like fashion is clothing and accessories for people to wear and a form of self-expression. But somewhere down the line, fashion also became about how this clothes and self-expression is captured, shared, and perceived through digital channels. Whether we're aware of it or not, we started to design not just for humans, but for humans interacting digitally. So for the context of today's conversation, we're going to take this a little further, a step deeper, because we're not just discussing the creation and design of clothes for humans, but we're discussing the design and creation of digital humans themselves, whether that's an avatar or perhaps a robot. At the core of this, we have one of the most existential questions that we can ask. What does it mean to be human? And in Web3, what does it mean to be a digital human? So our goal for today is to understand how this new reality of digital humans in Web3 affects fashion and the ways that we create. And we want to understand how we can tap into this new reality in alignment with circular models to go further than just innovation, but also to understand a method for survival for the fashion industry at large. And I'm now pleased to hand it over to Bethany, who will moderate our conversation today.
Thank you for inviting me to be a part of the Who Are They Designing Digital Humans panel. My name is Bethany Ryder. I'm Metaverse Editor at Jing Daily, and I'm really excited to be here alongside some huge names from across the industry. I think now would be a great time to kind of dive straight into the first question of the panel, while also giving our speakers the opportunity to personally introduce themselves as well. So Violaine, if you could start with yourself, and also in the process, I'm going to ask you, what does it mean to be a human, or what does it mean to be a digital human to you?
Yeah, so hello everyone, very happy to be here today. I am Violaine Gressier, I am French, as you can hear, I guess. I've been working for 25 years across different industries, from the entertainment industry, the tourism industry, and now I've been at Meta for the last 6 years. I've been building the luxury hub based in Paris. This is the exception that we have, as being French, because as you know, most of the main luxury groups are headquartered or, in Paris, in Switzerland, in Italy, but mainly in Paris, I would say. So I have the privilege of leading the global relationship with major luxury groups for Meta in Paris. To answer your question about what it is to be a human or a digital human, I would say that if you, there is a philosopher, a French philosopher, Montesquieu, it was back, in the time, who said that, the man is a social animal. And in fact, I guess that especially during the last pandemics that we all experience, we really realize that what makes us specific, that we need connection, we need to see people, we need to have friends, we need to really interact all the time. And I guess also that it was, selfishly, because I'm working at Meta, and the mission of this company is to connect people. I think it was a great opportunity for our our company to really state its mission and the core of its mission, which has, sometimes it can be seen negatively, but also a lot of positivity. So yeah, to me, to sum up, being a digital human, or just a human, is really all about socializing and being a social animal.
Yeah. If we could go to David now, please.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is David Robert. I'm the director of HRI at Boston Dynamics. HRI stands for Human Robot Interaction, and it's a fascinating design field that brings together kind of art and science. My background is for 10 years, I was working in Hollywood in the entertainment industry on films, computer animated films, simulations, and creating procedural animation systems and techniques. And then I came out here to the East Coast, where I'm based right now in Boston, where I went to MIT and I studied in a robot lab that specializes in social robots. And that's a new field of robotics. It's not the industrial robots, but it's rather robots that are made to be companions and interact with people. I did about 7 or 8 years in academia, and now I've been in total on the robot side of things for about 10 years in practice as a chief designer of robots themselves, as a head of product, and now again, leading the design team. We have an integrated design team here that's industrial designers, UX designers, UI designers. And I love my job. I feel like I've landed in a place where they really get it. And I'll describe a little bit further what I mean by that. But to go to this question, that honestly, I'm so glad, and I want to thank you guys for inviting me to be a part of this and having the privilege of speaking alongside the other distinguished speakers here. The question of what it is to be human is a question I've been often asking myself throughout my life and never coming up with a solid answer. So I just have sort of a list of things here. I mean, it's really to live, to die, to feel, to love, to fail, to start over, to learn, to have fun, to be in a body, in a space and time with others, to Violenne's point about the social nature of humans. And a little bit about how I feel about the difference, or, sort of how you juxtapose the idea of the human and a digital human or a robot. I would say that around 20 years ago, I had the opportunity of meeting some people who were completely obsessed with becoming post or transhuman. And although the extropian ideas were very exciting to discuss, I personally never felt like I fully bought into it. I decided that I wouldn't even try being transhuman or post-human, that I was sometimes struggling just being the best human I could be. If you think about it, there's so many amazing things that Olympic athletes do that are human, not post or transhuman. And those are the kind of things that really inspire me, the kind of human accomplishments that are just really amazing. So although digital humans lack a couple critical abilities, for example, to smell and taste delicious food, for now, the thing about digital humans that's great is that they're very, very playful and they're free in ways that human beings can't be. So, they can easily change their appearance, they can easily change their role, their milieu, the context of interaction. And so having that freedom to play in a new world, invent your own set of rules, is something that could be very, very liberating. And, similar to robots, digital humans exist in their own ontological category of being. So this is something that guides my thinking in terms of when people ask about the differences. They're very, very different, in my opinion. They're basically different categories of being and kind of hard to compare.
Thank you, David. And then if we could go to Sarah now.
Cool answers. This got me all thinking. Thanks for all that inspiration. Sarah Justo from a company called All, AWW. We named our company All because we wanted to awe people with what we do. And that's kind of the heart of what we do. We try to create contents that move people's hearts and ask you why. And One of our first creations 3 years ago was this virtual human called Ima. It's the pink-haired girl right behind me. This is also her brother, Zin. They're both virtual, completely virtual, no human whatsoever in them. And they all have their stories. They just live their life as normal humans do on Instagram, TikTok, and all these other channels. And it's really interesting because people follow them. Some people don't even know they're virtual. Some people know. And at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter because I have this thing that we're all very interactive on social media these days. And does it really matter if you have a body, a physical body with organs, or, not? So that's kind of the reason why we're doing it. And we're trying to, create things that really move people's hearts. And relating to that, when I saw the question of what does it mean to be human, it also relates to virtual humans as well, but I think it's our ability to imagine and also believe something. I think we all have our own truth, especially in today's day where there's like fake news, real news. I think everyone's looking at different realities and we think about that as our truth. And I think humans have, and I think we can do that because we have the power of imagination. And that also leads to the reason of, if you believe a virtual human is real, then it is real. It's as real as it can get. And I think that's what it means to be human and also what it means to be a digital human.
Hi, everyone. I'm Greg McNamara. I am currently a principal designer at Mojo Vision. And although I am working in AR and VR, I'm an industrial designer by training. And I started my career working in the fashion side of things in the outdoor performance world, and working with elite athletes and biomechanics and things like that. And then ended up, by virtue of living in the Bay Area, ended up in tech and consumer electronics and hardware, and then came full circle. And so, over time, I've merged those two things together. Both, the idea of this idea of human performance is really interesting to me, and how that interacts with hardware. And there's so many levels with that digital and physical interaction. And so the last 15 years of my career, I've been focusing on any of those areas where those two things merge. For me, the digital human is an interesting term. I think it's a confusing term in the sense I think of a digitized human, or like uploading our consciousness to the cloud. That's what that brings to mind. For me, it's more of maybe an extension of humanity, the extension of my persona in a different realm. And I think it's just beautiful. Like, it's a beautiful idea because it's very freeing. What makes us human is our ability to evolve. And, there's many things that make us human. I think one of the biggest things is we're self-deterministic. And so, if you think about, you can choose my evolution, I'm still locked in a physical body, and the VR and AR space allows us to somewhat be transhumanist, and like when we can actually get outside of that body and escape those limitations and choose our virtual and digital evolution and guide it and be sort of self-deterministic there.
Thank you so much, everyone, for introducing yourselves, and also some really great insights there to kick off today's panel. So I kind of wanted to get more into this defining of digital humans. So in comparison to a human, David at HRI at Boston Dynamics is widely known for its development of a series of dynamic, highly mobile robots, isn't it? So they often kind of possess a lot of human-like qualities, but if we look at avatars in comparison to robots, it feels like a lot of people perceive these digital avatars as more humans, especially because we're referring them as digital humans as opposed to robots. What are your thoughts on this? Do you see robots as any less human as an avatar?
I am designing from the perspective that robots are not human, that they are a new species that occupy their own category of being. So they aren't quite alive in the way that you and I are, but they're not totally inanimate like a large stone sculpture. They're somewhere in between. And as much as that sounds odd to us, what I've noticed so far is that young children, who are the future users of robots, they clearly understand, they get the difference between a real human, their pet dog, an online avatar, and a robot. So in their mental model, each one of those has a different level of agency. And thankfully, children today are smart and understand how to interact and what to expect from these different embodied agents. So I would say and clarify that our design goal is not to make the robot as human as possible, but rather to establish the robot as its own category of being or species.
Yeah, great. And so I kind of wanted to go to Violaine. Obviously at Meta, your profession there involves like analyzing the virtual space and recognizing how virtual humans are interacting socially. With the rise of platforms such as like Instagram and Twitter in Web 2, we were already to a degree, I guess, social humans, but now with the rise of Web 3, I feel like we're taking that to the next level. So on that point, what do you think it means to be a social human in the metaverse in the context of a global powerhouse like Meta?
But in fact, to us, it's still, it's just a continuity of our work and our mission. In fact, as you may know, we see the metaverse as a set of interconnected spaces that will let people do things that they couldn't do in the physical world, and for instance, not being in the same room. And in fact, what we saw is that in the recent decades, technology has removed barriers to communication and expression. And so we have evolved with that, and especially through the mobile. So we've seen barriers such as distance and cost become less and less important. And with the metaverse, we believe that it will be the next natural progression of the internet. It will be more and more immersive experiences. And I would say that the defining quality of the metaverse will be the feeling of presence, and we'll get back to that, when speaking about the avatar. But to go back to your question, in fact, people are clearly at the core of the social fabric in the metaverse, at least at the way we see it. And today, our team builds, the embodiment and the system to enable the best experiences connecting, into the metaverse. But I believe that for us at Meta, we see, the metaverse, we build for people and for the ways they express themselves, for the ways they communicate, for the way they want to play, to work together.
Can you walk us through Mojo Vision's work?
Yeah, I think this one is an interesting one because there's a lot we've shared publicly, and there's a lot that I can share with you guys today. First of all, it's a fascinating journey. I've been part of this vision for the last 2.5 years, and it's been amazing what I've seen. What was there in place when I came on board, and then where we're at today. It's just a remarkable amount of work that's been accomplished in a short time frame. But it's no joke to kind of assign the label like moonshot to this project. It's really, of all the hardware endeavors I've seen, AR and VR is very, very hard. Take that and then multiply that times 10. And that's what we're doing. That's how hard what we're doing is. And I think it's because it's a little bit of, we're having to build the highway and while we're in the road, while we're driving the car. So we're driving, and every mile we're having to lay down track or lay down asphalt right in front of us. And in some cases invent the asphalt. And so, what the vision was at the beginning of the company, as I understand it, since I wasn't there, 7 or 8 years ago during those discussions, the goal was to have an invisible computing solution. What does that mean? It means today we are sort of these digital layers and these devices that stand between us and real connection. And so there's a virtual world, there's a digital world that we all spend time with our online lives. But when we go into those worlds, we have now left the world behind that we're in, right? If I'm in the car and I'm texting and I'm here with my phone, I'm not paying attention to my partner in the seat next to me. I'm kind of engrossed in this thing over here, and I'm giving half my attention to both worlds. And so the idea is, even AR and of course VR suffers from this, right? This disconnection from reality. It's escapism, pure and simple, and that's not a bad word, but it is what it is, right? I'm obscuring the real world to go into another world. And even if you have a pass-through and camera and things like that, you've got an immersive display that's taking over your field of view, and that takes over also your mental state. And so the idea was, with this eyes up approach, we're looking out at the world and interacting with data. There's a lot of light data that we are burdened by every day. I'm checking my Apple Watch and getting notifications there. I'm opening up my screen and using Face ID to actually go into my messages. There's a constant level of distraction there, baseline. But a lot of those things, the time it takes to do that task or the act of doing that task takes your attention away. And so if you have a display that's in your eye and you have this thing that is so intuitive and so easy and frictionless to use, in theory, checking your messages is no longer a barrier to connection. It's, if anything, the goal is to bring us back to our humanity and to keep us more connected to the real world. So Mojo is not about, it's not that you can't use it for many things. It's still an open system. It's still yet to be defined in its entirety, but the vision is still this sense of like doing the things quickly that you need to do, get in and get out, if that makes sense. And so, there's many parts of the system, and, it would take a very long time to go through it all. But the technical achievements are incredible. This is a medical device because it has to be certified by both, obviously FDA here in the US and then European regulatory bodies. This, because it goes in the eye, is about as close to a medical device as you can get. It's sort of something that's implanted in the body, or surgical tool, or, pharma. And so we're not designing an Apple Watch where it sits on the skin. Once it's in your eyes, there's all kinds of risk factors that come into, not to scare anyone. It's not scary, it's just heavily regulated. And so there's a precision to the effort that's required. This display sits on the contact lens in your eye. It projects, not projects, it's the image. Is the best way to describe the image that you're getting is, it's like looking at a Cassegrain telescope. If anyone has had the pleasure of using one of those before, and you've got an optical element in a mirror sitting in the middle of the mirror, and you would think that you would see a black dot reflected in that. But when you actually look at it, you're seeing the light bounce around through the tube, and you're seeing a fully resolved image. There's no blocker in the middle. And so that's the principle of the display itself and how it works. And so your experience of using it is, you have your vision, you have 20/20, you're looking around the world, the display comes up and then it disappears, and you don't see it when it's off. And that's it feels like a miracle the first time you put it next to your eye. It's amazing. It's incredible.
Thank you. So if we kind of move away from this defining of the digital human and now kind of get more into like the design process and what exactly that involves in the context of not only the digital human, but the world that we're creating for these digital humans. Sarah, you're one of the producers for Asia's #1 virtual human, as you quite mentioned previously. It has a total of, she has a total of 2 million followers across social platforms like Instagram and TikTok. But when it comes to creating these virtual humans, where does the design process begin for you? What exactly does it look for? And how do you kind of navigate this hierarchy of design?
It's a very meticulous process. It really depends. Ima was the first virtual human we created, and so far we've created around 10 virtual human, and some of them are also in partnership with other brands or companies. And for example, Ima, she's all of our team is actually in Tokyo, Japan. So we actually created her out of a lot of inspiration we take from Japan. For example, anime, manga, just all the subculture and fashion that Japan has. We tried to mush not all of it just plainly, but very very meticulously around her personality, around her face and everything. Because when you're creating a realistic face, it's not about drawing a character like a Simpsons, right? It's like literally plastic surgery level, where it's like if you change 1 millimeter of the size of your nose, you have a whole different impression. So we really have to go into the nitty-gritties of just what does it mean to have a face, and what kind of a face tells what kind of stories. So when we created a virtual human for China, we partnered with a Chinese company, and we created China's #1 virtual human, which is named Ayai. She has like white hair, completely different face. And we asked them because we didn't know the beauty standards of China. And I think it's important that the virtual human speaks to whoever it's speaking to. So we can't just create one that we think would speak to, the Chinese audience. And so they give us a lot of research on what kind of, just mood boards, what kind of makeup, what kind of face is very popular in China right now. And of course, from there, we tried to create a very original, likable face. And when we created her, she had literally on a Chinese platform 40 million views on her first post, which was crazy to us. So, I think it really depends on the situation and what you're trying to convey through the virtual human.
Absolutely. There's so much that goes into these virtual humans that we don't see, and it goes way beyond the eye. So as we mentioned before, David, robots and digital humans are different in nature and production. You made it quite clear that it's imperative to your company and yourself that robots are their own entity in a way. How would you say this sort of differs or relates to the process of creating a robot as compared to a digital human?
Yeah, thank you. And Sarah, I'd love to learn about how you're creating digital humans, because I actually see a lot of parallels between designing digital humans that are supposed to appeal to certain audiences, as well as designing robots that need to appeal to certain audiences. So that's fascinating. Robot design over here starts with pretty practical things like understanding a problem and understanding all the people that it impacts and the environment, and then building a robot that is very focused at solving the problem. In the past, not at this company, I've worked on and designed robots that are way more like living characters, similar to a digital human. And I would say that at this company, we're thinking a lot more, if there's a spectrum between living characters and fully like just a machine, we're more on the side of creating a power tool. That's the kind of winning approach for our particular business. But when I designed the living character, it had to appeal to children because it was an educational robot and it had to be playful and entertaining. And so we did something similar to what Sarah was describing, and it was for the Chinese market, where we studied and understood like what the trends were, like, girls like to put flowers in their hair and that kind of thing. So we added a little flower antenna to the robot. So, but again, at Boston Dynamics, the team focuses completely on making robots that are safe, useful, reliable, and they're mostly industrial. So they're mostly used. This is not your home robot. This is not your pet robot. This is a robot that gets a lot of work done that you don't want to do. Is the whole point. Because we have some very talented designers here, we do everything. We want it to look good. So, it's getting the job done, but it's doing it in style. And we're constantly trying to change people's minds about what robots can do, because our robots can accomplish some amazing feats of kind of athletic, sort of displaying their athletic intelligence. But when we go about making the robot, we study the problem, we study the people it impacts, we study the environment. Then we go into this other phase that's super interesting, where we explore the morphology. And that's basically the embodiment of the robot. So it has to be appropriate for the task. If it's an underwater robot, for example, we don't design those, but if it was, then its body would be more probably similar to something that can move underwater, right? So when we explore that morphology design space, we know just by experience that it turns out that having legs and being able to walk is just better than just having wheels, if in the case where you're trying to move around different types of terrain. So imagine, a wheeled robot in the snow, for example, it can get stuck, or a wheeled robot trying to go up some stairs, it can also get stuck. So everything is very, very intentional. So we think about every single limb and thing we add to the robot. We don't just think, hey, we're trying to make it look like a person. No, we think, hey, we're trying to make it do its job really well and be really efficient at it. So that's how we design. In addition, one thing that's a little bit different here is that the designers work very, very, very tightly with the engineering team, because that's kind of the only way to do it really well. It's such an awesome job to be able to have the privilege to work with these amazing mechanical engineers and electrical engineers, that have all gone to the best schools and have a lot of experience and are kind of like, to me, this is like the most exciting robot building place that I've ever been at. And we work with them very, very closely, because I want more science fact and less science fiction. If you were any designer, if you say, go build a robot, they would probably make a really cool design that could maybe never be built. Whereas the designers here, their designs have to be something that we can actually build that's actually useful. So there's a lot of give and take, and that process is very, very tight knit. And mostly the industrial designers on my team are focused on that and have been doing that for a decade. So I also wanted to mention that one of the things that I keep on telling people in general and here that are interested in learning about HRI is that it's very clear that the appearance of the robot can influence how it's perceived, but the behavior of the robot can also influence how it's perceived, right? So what that means to me is that there are local cultures and different types of narratives about robots, and those influence perception. So for example, we've noticed that some people think robots are here to save the world. Other people think robots are here to take over and make a big mess. So there are three factors. There's appearance, behavior, and perception. And as designers, we can control the appearance and we can control the behavior, and we can't really control perception. Perception is something that, like I said, people bring their bias and the narratives and the things that they're used to seeing, like the movies they've seen when they grew up. So what we can do is lower the expectation so that we kind of under promise and over deliver, and then adjust the appearance and the behavior, because you can have something that looks super cute, but then it behaves in a way that's totally amazing and it gives you a whole different feeling about it. So that relationship between appearance and behavior, I think, holds true for digital humans too, because style isn't just what you wear but it's how you move, and it goes down to the bone, right?
The Mojo lens merges a human with technology in an almost intimate way. How do you approach the design process for this?
That's what's so interesting about this, is it's a different design. So in the sense of, designing for being user focused, and, we all sort of have these mantras and these things that we repeat, and principles of good design, whether it's industrial design or digital product design, honor the user is something that I've always come back to, because I think design gets caught up in a little bit of its own marketing jargon sometimes. And, you try to convince people, wait, we're removing this feature because we think it's better for people. But sometimes it's just a marketing tool to remove something or to add something. It's not necessarily been well researched. You're trying to anticipate user needs in the end of the day and how things will be used. And that's hard to do when you don't have a paradigm. So there's two different schools of design and building products. And I'm oversimplifying it, but you've got iterative design, which is, the process of designing, quite frankly, like, iOS or Android. Every year there's iterative updates. At some point, you had to start from scratch, and you build an OS, and you had to build a system, an interaction model that worked for people, and you had to define everything. Once that system is defined at the very beginning, then you've got, incremental iterative design over years. And where we're at, with the latest versions of iOS and Android is an incredibly long journey, right? And how many people have participated in that design journey? But the hardest thing to do is and the most exciting for me is the first part, when you're defining something. And so at the lens level, we're in the middle of defining it, because this display sits on your eyes and it's boundless in a sense. And so not only that, but there's this idea of being able to use it without kind of resorting to a control-based paradigm, a physical control-based paradigm, because that is the dominant paradigm for these systems today for a reason. It's precise. It allows a lot of multimodal input. It allows people to customize things. Muscle memory is a real thing. We don't talk about it enough, but it's an important topic. And so I think the point of where we started this journey, and even where we're at today, we're trying to design without presumption or take things for granted. When you're doing an iterative system, it's easy to take things for granted because you're building on the shoulders of the giants that you're standing on from before, and the work that was there before. So you have some tools, you have some, you can find your way because there's a map, and you're following the map, you're building out more of the map, but there's principles established and things like that. So if you think about the best way to think about the Mojo lens is, I think about it like the first, like car design, automotive design. Automotive design is built on the paradigm of the horse and carriage. It hasn't really changed, right? If the horse and carriage, defining that system, I've got four wheels, I've got my, my propulsion force in the front, my locomotion is my horse. I have people sit between two axles, and they sit in this compartment in the middle. And the cars we're building today, electric or not, still really aren't very different from that principle. The dominant paradigm is 4 wheels, not 3. Why? Because we've been doing it forever, and it works. But we're building on something over time. We're pre-horse pre-horse-drawn carriage in so many ways with Mojo, because what you think of an AR display is really VR and AR. It's computational. It's like I'm sitting, instead of sitting in a computer anymore, using a keyboard and a mouse, I've put on a display in front of my face. I've still got my tools of interaction. I've got my controllers. Mojo is not that system. It's eye-based UI, and even like things like simple things like notifications. How does my eye track through space in this paradigm of interacting is totally different. We had assumptions we made at the beginning, things we wanted to try. We do a lot of user testing and challenge those assumptions, and we're still in the middle of doing that. So, and a lot of this starts from a guiding paradigm as well. Like, we need a good provocation to start with. And so if you say, I want to make AR glasses, well, the provocation is about AR, but the assumption is we're making glasses. And so someone had to start with the question, well, why do we have to be limited by glasses? And that, if you go back to that big level question, that defines everything below it. And then you can't take anything for granted, because we're doing something no one's done before. And so even in the sense of, the visual language system and the physical hardware itself, we're not, in many ways, we're still not even the design stage, if that makes sense. There's lots of stages of design, but there's the user focused side, the research focused side, which is still a lot of where the work is being done today. And eventually you get to make it pretty, make it attractive, and focus on really dialing in, the pixels themselves and, gradients and all the things that will be the final thing that people will experience. We're still trying to define some of those paradigms and build them out. And it's really interesting. I think the other thing is our design process is really dealing with the latency issues of technology. If you don't think about it in a daily context, but we spend a lot of time thinking about it, is whether I'm sitting in the cockpit of a vehicle, a plane, or the time it takes me to pick up my phone, even with Face ID or something that's fast, and to get to what I want to do, when it's on your eye, there's a latency issue, not because by virtue of the effect on the eye, but even just this thing is longer. It took me longer to do this and check my messages than to just think about checking my messages. And what a display like ours really enables is the ability to have an interface. Again, a lot of work to be done, but a lot of the paradigms are already there, and the software is working, the algorithms are working for eye tracking. The idea is have an interface that's at the speed of thought. You don't have to think about moving your mouse, you just do it now, because once you learn it, the minute before, it's almost like precognition. Before you even think about moving your mouse, your hand is doing it. That's why a mouse works so well. We're trying to replicate that with the eye. And so you're eliminating steps. And so if we do this right, we will have an interface that's almost like a thought-based interface. It's involuntary, it's natural, it's frictionless. That's where we want to get to, because that really would be a beautiful system.
Absolutely. And I think on that note of perception and in the design process, Sarah, I just wanted to bring it back to you for a moment. Obviously, your virtual humans have worked on a number of virtual fashion and Web3 projects, but how would you say the design choices implemented when creating digital humans can be compared to when designing fashion or art or architecture?
Ooh, interesting. But no, what David said was super interesting, because, I think it touches on both ends of the whole field, where it's like aesthetics, looks, fashion. And then there is the whole robotic side. I've seen all the robots from Boston Robotics, and it's super amazing. It's really fun. It's likable too, as humans, right? When we're creating virtual fashion, or I guess fashion creation in general, compared to virtual humans, I'm also like an artist myself. Like, I've graduated art university. Like, I'm very into the visual sides of things. But when I see the CEO is basically the one who is behind most of the creative direction when we're creating virtual humans, not the virtual fashion side, but it's a whole different process. It's like a plastic surgeon merged with a creative director merged with a producer. So it's like you have to think about the logistics of the face, and then you have to think about how it's going to be perceived, as David said, right? Because it's as the looks literally are decided in like 3 seconds. I think there's so many virtual humans in the world right now, and for example, there are so many tools right now available that allows you to make virtual humans realistically. I think the technology is advancing so fast, but there is no technology that allows you to have the ability to create a face as an artist, in fact. And I think that's just, I guess, it's a very specific skill that cannot have technology advance into it to be digitalized. So I think no matter how far technology goes, there's always going to be a person that needs to design the virtual humans, to design or produce the virtual humans. Same as fashion, in a sense, right? Like I can make a cloth for myself, but it will take a big designer to make a beautiful dress and win best dressed at Met Gala, right? So I think that goes the same with virtual humans. So it's a really weird, like plastic surgery kind of level, like very meticulous, but yeah.
Thank you. So I wanted to put this question out to anyone who feels that they want to answer or they have quite a valuable insight. But when we consider the technology that's used to create these digital humans and robots, how important would you say artificial intelligence is? Would you say that AI in particular is a component that helps to make these designs more human?
Yeah, I can take a stab at the question. I mean, basically for robots, generally speaking, the body and the AI are equally important. And it's really critical that they work well together for the robot to be truly useful. So, the goal is to build robots that enrich people's lives by doing tasks that are dull, dangerous, or dirty. And these are tasks that humans just don't want to do. But when you pair an AI with a body, it simply makes it more robot, not more human. And for us, the goal is not to make human-like robots. So it might be confusing because you see that one of our robots, our advanced humanoid, does look like a human. But the reason that the advanced humanoid robot looks human is because that's the best form or shape for the robot to take to accomplish tasks in a world built for humans, right? So for example, how does a really short, small little wheeled robot on your kitchen floor turn a doorknob to open a door to go to another room, right? The doorknob was built by humans for human hands, and the door is even in the size that's correct for a human. So the idea isn't to change the world or the environment to integrate robots. It's rather the opposite, is our belief, is that the technology and the robots should adapt to the world that's already built. And that's a world that exists today that's made by humans for humans.
Yeah, that's a really interesting perspective. So kind of looking at the virtual world and how it's opening up myriad opportunities to create, visuals and concepts that aren't possible in the physical world. When it comes to designing in the metaverse, Violaine, I wanted to put this towards you. It seems that there's this choice between designing something that mirrors physical reality or creating something that diverges entirely. How do you think these choices play into the way that we respond as digital humans?
So thank you for this question. Again, I think, looking at Meta, we really connect people. I think the main difference in between us three is that we speak to real humans. So right now, what we try to do that, because, the metaverse, as you understand, is really our belief that, we are building this vision of, what is the next revolution. So to us, avatar is a key priority. It's a very important building block, on this road to the metaverse, because we believe that your avatar is synonymous with your digital identity. And in fact, we believe that there are three main core qualities of your avatar. So as I just said, it's your identity, but your identity can be multiple. your avatar can be, you know, like a realistic looking hologram when you will meet your parents in a room. And you can also try to be a robot in a VR game with your friends. So there is really this idea of multiple identities, if I want to, you know, digital identities, I would say. So the first quality is identity. The second is expression. And this is really all about, you know, communicating with others, because body language, expression, when you speak to someone, give you a lot of cues on the emotion of that person. So we are going to roll out a lot of more expressive 3D avatars across our apps. And it's really just the beginning of a deeper level of expression that we are aiming for. So again, for us, you know, it's really building into making what's us human into these new digital spaces, metaverse spaces, you know, but being really what we are deeply. And the last thing that, as I mentioned, to us, the main quality of the metaverse is the feeling of presence, even if you are very far from each other. And in fact, your avatar will be your representation, and will make the presence, will make your presence real when you are in the metaverse. So really, this feeling of being present will be possible thanks to your avatar. So really, we are building avatar thanks to for these qualities. I would say that right now we have a first expression, so it's more like a cartoony kind of avatar, but we have these amazing other opportunities that we are also thinking of, you know, going from, you know, realistic holograms to robots to many, many, many other things.
When you look at our design process and the steps we went through, it ended up in, I mean, every day it's kind of like we run into like this thing where it's like, oh my God, wow, like never, the process led us to a completely different you know, path than we ever would have assumed getting started. And I think one of the big ones is the support system. So you've got the lens, we talked about that a little bit. Then we have a physical system that supports the lens. And so one of the things I think people don't understand yet, and maybe it's also hard to wrap our heads around, because you think of contact lens and you think of this lightweight, you know, tiny system. The truth is we have to ship essentially the same hardware that powers a VR headset in many ways, or a pair of AR glasses. We still have to wear on the body somewhere else to support the lens. And so when I say surprising, you know, we knew that going forward, because there's so many safety issues, regulatory issues around, you know, RF, you know, safety of basically, you know, radio frequency radiation and skin tissue. And so, you know, everything has to be ultra low power, you know, can't generate a lot of heat. And so we've had to offload some of those components elsewhere in the body. And so our system requires someone to wear something on their body, right? On the torso somewhere as basically a relay. We call it the relay. And we didn't know what that was going to look like. And so if you think about, you know, just the size of maybe a large deck of cards, you know, an extra thick stack, you know, with battery and components and processors and all this stuff that's in your phone, I've got to wear a phone on my body somewhere to power this thing. And what's really interesting is, you know, kind of in the same way science fiction, we all have a vision of what AR is because we've seen it many, many times through movies and TV shows, and, you know, read about it for decades through science fiction authors. And, you know, that shaped our vision of that. The same thing is true of wearable tech. We've had this idea of the body worn computer for 20 years. I can look at old art students' work. I remember my boss and I were looking at these old, you know, student gallery work from Pratt from I think the late 90s, early 2000s. And the idea of like a body worn computer. Eventually we'll have these distributed computers everywhere, but no one had thought through that because no one shipped that product. So outside of gaming, right, we have controllers all over the place. And that's what's really cool is we ended up having to build that system. And so when I say we're surprised, we're really surprised because we start with some really, you know, quick and easy stuff. It's like, well, what kind of form factors would people adopt? Let's you know, build on things that have been widely adopted, whether it's a necklace or a shirt. And the more time we spend with it and designing for edge cases, like I'm going for a run, or, hey, you know what? I am a low vision user. I have other mobility impairments, comorbidities. Like I had a stroke. I can't actually use my left or my right arm anymore. So I have difficulty putting this on. When we looked at some of those edge cases and specifically at fashion itself, I've got to wear this. We're asking people to wear an accessory that's yet to be defined. And that's probably going to be hard to hide. We now become a fashion design company overnight without wanting to be, and we're not talking about branding and all that stuff. We've got to make smart choices. And so we've been through like 50 different form factors now. We've messed with everything from a small, like a fitted vest, to like a compression base layer, to a necklace, to like a sling, more of like a crossbody kind of style pack. And could we just embed things in a backpack that you take on and off? And so we built a lot of these prototypes and tested them on people, but it's really leading to a cool place. So we're starting to get into 3D scanning and pattern making stages now to try to actually see, can we build one thing that fits everybody? Because it's very hard. If you're going to build something that now I have to wear every day, it's got to perform, right? It's got to have the materials have to feel nice against the skin. It's got to work with, undergarments, base layers, layering. It's got to be tailored to lots of people. And so one size fits all that's adjustable. That's what the Silicon Valley wants to ship, quite frankly, because it's easy. I don't have to get into sizing, and I don't have to worry about merchandising. And, oh, you got to send this thing to try it on beforehand and make sure I get it to fit you well and it's flattering. But if we're going to put this technology out there in the world and it's going to be invisible, the lens will be invisible, but the computer will be visible. And so now, there's a lot of people focused in our organization on the lens, and there's plenty of effort there. And now in tandem with that, we're really realizing like we've got to make something actually quite beautiful and surprising, and maybe end up defining something that is going to be, with mass adoption, something everybody wears every day. It's a really big problem to solve, and it's fascinating. And so, yeah, we're getting into a very expressive realm, and we're trying to do something that, we're looking at two versions of this. Like, one, does it just disappear and it's this really generic, genderless, invisible thing, almost like, could it be I don't know, best example would be like a sports bra, or some kind of something I wear under my shirt for running. That's one option as well. We also have the ability to celebrate it and say, oh, you know what? Oh, I can see, oh, you're wearing the Mojo lens today, because we don't want you to focus on the eyes. The point is that you're not going to notice I'm wearing the lens. But this can be a signifier. It can be a cultural signifier. It can be also just a good conversation starter. It's like, oh, cool, you're wearing the lens. Cool. And now I know you're doing something. It could be a way to help people feel more comfortable and to, kind of create a sense of trust, because you're being transparent. Hey, I'm wearing the lens today. I've got a superpower. Just wanted you to know, like, I see stuff. I can see, when I look at you, your name pops up, so that, I understand who I'm talking to, or I have a translation app that's running so I can, it's the universal translator of Star Trek, right? In your eye. That's totally possible with our technology. And so, but we want to be honest about it, and we want to make good design choices. And so, long way of saying we didn't end up thinking we'd be in fashion at all, but we're very quickly intersecting with fashion. And it's very interesting.
Thank you. So on that point of kind of expression and the way we kind of express ourselves as digital avatars, I think a lot of the conversations that we're having in real life are kind of coming into the metaverse as well, particularly to do with sustainability and the environmental kind of conflict that Web3 proposes. On that note, David, I wanted to come to you because obviously the technology that you're using at Boston Dynamics is pioneering. It's something that we haven't really seen before. And on that note, how do you consider how sustainability comes into play when you're designing these robots?
Given the state of the planet right now, and the leadership at Boston Dynamics and everyone that works here, pretty much, we all have a very strong desire to be a net positive force in the world. We do engage in various practices around circularity in our design process, but we can always do more, right? And we're steadily learning and benefiting from our parent company's approach to designing using sustainable materials. I'm not sure if you know this, but Boston Dynamics was purchased by Hyundai, and they have some wonderful designers there that have really looked into, sourcing different materials, end of life, recycling, upcycling. And we, since they're a much larger company, they're getting a lot of this information from their customers. The market is asking for it. So the company is responding. And so as a benefit of being part of that group, we're learning and accessing some of the methodologies and techniques that they're using. And the last thing I want to say too, and this is nothing that Boston Dynamics is doing, but my dream personally is that, you never know, like maybe one day in the future, robots might have a really big role to play in cleaning up the mess humans made.
Yeah. Another conversation that we're having, as well as the sustainability stories, is the diversity in the metaverse and the diversity of these digital humans. Diversity in the metaverse is something that's become, rightfully so, a talking point of great importance, as representation and inclusion are so imperative when it comes to creating an accessible domain for us all. Sarah, a lot of your virtual humans have wide exposure on social platforms, like we mentioned previously. But when creating a virtual human, how important is it to you to ensure that different cultures and ethnicities are being represented? You did mention quite a bit of this beforehand, but I'd like to give you an opportunity to, you know.
For sure, for sure. I think virtual humans, I'm a very strong like LGBT, like everything, you know, like racism, like there's so much in Japan actually that I'm very mad about every day. But I think when I think about all these factors that surround me as a human living in a society, when I see virtual humans, I see them as the most free form, most equal, most nothing, well, not nothing, but like a most equal state of a human as could be, you know. I think it goes back to the point of, because, you know, for example, Ima, she doesn't have a sex, she doesn't have a gender, she doesn't have a passport, she doesn't have an age. And what that makes that is a very flat nothing in a sense. And I think that allows us to be very open, that allows us to really find kind of like the 0 point where it's like, hey, we're all the same, because essentially we are, except that society makes us think otherwise. It's very similar to like when I play, like, for example, Mario Kart on my Switch. You know, you have all these different avatars that people are making, you know, some are really weird, some will represent themselves, but I'm not like, you look at that dark skinned guy, or like, look at that, like nobody is like that, you know, like when we're becoming virtual avatars, I think we have the ability to transform and create something from a zero basis. And that allows for such a freedom, in a sense that we don't have in our physical bodies that have limitations of, you know, a lot of the things that I mentioned that Ima doesn't have. So aside from that, when, you know, but still we find it's really interesting how we're still, for example, creating Asian aesthetics or, you know, other Caucasian aesthetics when we're creating virtual humans. There's many virtual humans across the world. And for example, like a Brazilian company is creating a Brazilian avatar virtual human. And it's really interesting how culture plays into what the face looks like or what the person will be doing, because they don't exist, right? It's controlled by something or someone. And so, but I think there's so much opportunities. And I think I touched upon the culture topic when I talked about the Chinese virtual human, but I think there's so much opportunities to link all of us together through the equalness that's found in the virtual world. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I'd like to just stay with you for this next question. But in the physical world, in the offline world, we've kind of come to cultivate this sense of what is cool. And like, do you think that there's a sense of what type of self-representation or identity is cool in the metaverse in the same way there is to some extent in real life now?
Ooh, what's cool? I think there is. I think it's all about internet culture. You know, I think people who present themselves in a very, I think there's a specific language, also aesthetic language in the internet that I am also familiar with. And I think it differs through generations as well. But, you know, I think even with Ima, she doesn't exist, but people literally look up to her. People literally dress themselves in the physical world or literally color their hair like her, who doesn't exist. And I think it's all about internet culture. And I think everyone's living on their apps. And I always say this because where, you know, for example, I follow Kim Kardashian, and I've never met her, unfortunately, but I've seen her on TV, I've seen her on my Instagram, I see her stories, I'm like, oh, she's in the pool today, she's having a good day, but that's all my perception of her, and she's creating a whole reality on her Instagram. And I think that's the same as Ima, you know, like I've never met Ima. I see on her Instagram that maybe she's out walking her dog, or maybe she's eating a hamburger, you know, but if I've never met her, but I still believe that's real. So I think I don't know how much I answered the question, but I think there, of course, there is a cool relating to internet culture. And I think there's also a reality that's related to internet culture, which perceives people as cool in their virtual being form, but maybe not in the physical world, but it doesn't really matter anymore. So
kind of on touching on that topic of internet culture, I guess via Lane, large-scale social platforms act as a channel for individuals to share their beliefs and allow their voices to be heard. Do you think that digital humans also have an opportunity, just like our IRL selves, to be reflective of interest and demands in areas such as politics, environmental protection, and I guess gender expression?
It's a big and tough question. Again, I think first off, we learn from the past, and we learn from the last 17 years of building social networks and so on. And I think that what's interesting with the metaverse is that it's very early stage. We communicated this vision of what we think is the next revolution, very early in the process, in order because we want that this metaverse is a future built by everyone for everyone. And it's when you hear all that has been said, really your imagination is more important than the circumstances of your birth, because you can represent yourself however you want. So really this is really interesting, because so there are lots of things that needs to be done, but when you were saying, what's cool in the metaverse, in fact, we don't know, and we will explore all together. So we have to work towards a very inclusive metaverse, and we have this major partnership with a lot of non-profit organization, academic institution. We invest 50 million, we really invest 50 million in 2 years, to really build what's an inclusive, to understand what should be an inclusive metaverse. We also need to make sure that we'll have, a lot of creators from diverse backgrounds, so really building something that is right from the start, totally inclusive, representative of, everyone. If you go back to the avatars that we launched, when we launched our updated avatars last year, we offered more than 1 quintillion different combinations, really to be as representative as we could be, and it's just the beginning. So really, I think, I'm quite impressed by all the investment that we are making to have this inclusive approach, to also, be sure that, we partners, as you said, with, politics and so on. But so it's very early. I think we learn from the past, and, there are lots of things that needs to be done very early in the process, and a lot of foundational elements that we need to make right now to ensure that businesses, creators, people will see value into this metaverse. But I'm pretty confident that we are doing what needs to be done early enough.
Thank you. And now I'd quite like to touch on the topic of digital human interaction. Sarah, I guess you could say to some degree that the virtual humans that you've produced have become the next generation of tastemakers. But who are the tastemakers informing the design of digital humans? Or in a sense of mirroring the nature of blockchain in itself, would you say it's a more decentralized approach?
So is the question like tastemakers, like, for example, virtual humans becoming more decentralized or not? Is that the question?
Who's informing the design of the digital humans? Who are you looking to? Who's, influencing the production of these digital humans?
Right. Understood. I think we're looking at a future where there's many different variations of how a virtual human can run. There is an option of one person being on the inside. Maybe that person can even create how it would look like. Maybe 2 people can be on the inside, maybe 50 people, 500 people. I'm not sure. Maybe it can be a decentralized system in that sense. What if 50 people are literally controlling one human? But what we're thinking would be very interesting is to find interesting souls, in a sense, the people who are in the inside, and amplify who they are as a person through the visuals of another person, I guess, as a virtual human. So we're thinking things like, imagine, for example, me, maybe I can choose a virtual human that can literally look like however I want to be. Maybe what I want to say or what kind of activism I want to do will be better reflected on that. Better yet, more contrast. Imagine like an Indian boy imagining wanting to look and say so many things to the world. Maybe he can look like a BTS member, and maybe whatever he's saying will literally amplify way much more. But what if a mental health technician wants to spread his message on TikTok, but he looks, like a normal person? Maybe he can have, I don't know, rainbow hair or even look like a BTS member again. But I think there's so many ways of designing a virtual human to amplify whatever is in the inside. And of course, there's other ways of, decentralization. As I said, 50 people owning one virtual human, what will that even look like? What will be the best way to speak to people? Maybe a country can even have a human to represent themselves. So I think there's so many ways when we're thinking of, the limitations of humans when we have one body, one soul. Whereas a virtual human, that's not the case. And you can choose what you're going to look like. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think if there's one thing that this panel is teaching us, is that the possibilities really are endless. So kind of continuing with this idea of digital human interaction, David, this is a pretty big question, I'm sorry in advance, but how do you as a developer approach this relationship between humans and robots and the interaction between the two?
Well, first, I just wanted to stop for a quick second and pause and say that I really enjoyed being part of the panel, and I've got a lot to think about, really inspired by what Violette and Sarah are saying. There's so many similarities. And it's true that I think there's a central theme here about play and freedom that you have with digital humans that, our robots like to play too. So, you mentioned BTS, and we lent BTS some robots to be backup dancers recently. So when you said BTS a couple of times, I was excited to hear that. And, our robots love to dance. They love to challenge themselves to do flips, forward backflips, like just play around. But in general, to answer the question, we use the principles of HRI, which is human robot interaction. It's, like I mentioned before, really fascinating transdisciplinary field that somehow brings together robotics, AI, psychology, social psychology, character design, which is a huge field in itself, anthropology, ethics, and then animation to make the behaviors, and then of course industrial design to make the whole thing real. And I would say that for me personally and for our team, the approach is biased towards the human needs in the human robot relationship. So of course we love to make robots really well, but we are always constantly biased towards what the human needs first and foremost. And it's very important in that process to define the role of the robot right away. You need to figure out what the role and the purpose of the robot is, clearly define it from the beginning, because all of us have a different imagined robot in our mind. That imagined robot comes from our childhood, from movies, etc. And one of the main tasks actually of HRI is to set expectations realistically, because it's really hard to be designing against all the different imagined robots that people have in their minds, which are totally different than what's actually being created nowadays. So we also have this ability as human beings to anthropomorphize and to project animacy onto inanimate objects, right? Like I mentioned before, people think robots are here to save the world. Others people think that robots are going to take over, and that's a difficult thing, difficult context to build in. But what I really like about this kind of work that I do with my team here is that even though right now there aren't any formal laws or policies about AI and robotics, no international policies, and even national ones, they're still developing them right now. What that means is that it's anything goes. And I've chosen specifically to join this company because we believe that the responsibility lies in the creators and the makers of the robots. And so we've adopted ethical principles, and this is what Boston Dynamics has done, is taken a really strong approach, refuse to weaponize the robot, refuse to intimidate a person or an animal with a robot, and always bias towards the human. And literally, because I saw those values and ethical statements on the website, is why I decided to approach the company, because, in the long term, it's just, for me personally, I have to share the values of the people that I put all my energy into.
So if we come to you, Greg, do you think a cyborg future is on the cards or already even here?
Man, we've got to figure out what that term cyborg, if we even want that term around anymore. It feels like an artifact of, the last 60 years of science fiction. They've got these terms, android, cyborg, and they all mean something specific, but I like the term transhumanism because I think it's a little more, it stimulates the imagination a bit more, and it gets you thinking broader than what does it mean to just, supplant or replace parts in the body with something artificial. I think we're already there. I think, I was thinking about this the other day because my mother-in-law just got her knees replaced, or one knee. She's going to get the other one done. But point being, once she started talking to friends of the same age about it, they're all like, "Oh, you're going to do that too? I just had that done last year." Like, it was no big deal. It was like going to the doctor and getting a flu shot for them, of a certain age. And 20 years ago, 25 years ago, that wasn't a thing. Someone who had a bad knee and, in their late 60s, it would be done. They would be, looking at something degenerative. They would be in a wheelchair. And now we just assume you just get replaced. No big deal, right? And we're headed down that path with so many technologies, whether it's, growing tissue in the lab or replacing organs or regrowing things. I think we're already there. I think we've been headed there for a while, and I think the technology is caught up. The question is whether it's the right thing to do. I think that's what it always has to come back to. Is it the right thing to become a cyborg? How do you keep your humanity when you become a cyborg? Or you merge with this other thing, whether it's a digital system or a physical one. And so I think something like Mojo Vision is interesting because you already wear contact lenses. Many people do today. We're not asking you to wear something else to replace the contact lens you're already wearing. And so I think, in the sense that we're already there with so many aspects of our lives, we're already comfortable living with augmentations, and you consider, even the Apple Watch is a sort of augmentation. It's external augmentation, but the ability to do all that stuff on your wrist, it gives you a little bit of a superpower that you didn't have before. Insights into your body and your physical state and all that kind of stuff is just, when you really think about it, we take it for granted today, but 10 years ago, that was not a thing. It's really remarkable. And to think where we're going to be in the next 10 years with these tools, I think the coolest thing about becoming, to use your term, a cyborg, is the skill building that it will enable. People will be able to do things. If you're able-bodied today, you're able to do a lot of things, and there's, ableism and there's a lack of empathy there, I think, sometimes, but you can, with these tools, you can learn new skills that you couldn't otherwise learn. Like, you don't spend 10 years to play the piano. What if I could experience what it's like to be a concert pianist without having to put in the 30,000 hours that it requires, to become an expert in something that is frequently referenced. The level of digital skills, or even, like drawing tools. I've been a person who's been drawing on paper my entire life. I went to school for it. I still love doing it. I still prefer it, but there's people out there who don't enjoy that, but then, they can put on a VR headset and use a tool like Gravity Sketch and express an idea quicker. And it frees up their ability to express an idea because they may not have the skill set or the education or practice to express an idea, but you've given them a new tool to express themselves. And that's what, AI is going to be doing with Midjourney and all that kind of stuff as well, is you're giving a lot more people access to expression. And I think that can only be a good thing.
Sarah, for you, what does this creation and development of virtual humans mean? We've kind of touched on it, but what do you think it means as a way of embodying and representing self-expression, but also being a vehicle to market and communicate ideas from brands?
For sure. I think, we get thousands of emails every single a week from like literally the top brands, fashion brands, electric brands, even countries wanting to make virtual humans, because there's so many virtual human companies in the world right now. Actually, any CG company can literally create a human looking thing, But I think it's very hard to create a believable and emotional provoking virtual humans. I think they all come around at one point where it's like, hey, you're the only one who can make it at this point. But I think there is possibility in brands having virtual humans. We've done a few, but a roadblock that we always encounter is that it loses the interesting part of a person's ego when a company's behind a virtual human. So, I can be interesting because I can say whatever I want as a human being, but when 10 people are in a meeting, they're like, hey, what's the next Instagram post? It's going to be #Oceans Day. You know what I mean? Like with the ocean, it's not going to be something that's egoistic. It's not going to be, and maybe this is a bad example, but all of the Kanye West Instagram posts, like no company's going to approve that, you know what I mean? But it makes a person interesting. And because that person's ego is showing, and that's lost when a company is behind a virtual human and it looks like a marketing scheme. It looks not real because we're so sensitive to advertisements these days. Like we can tell exactly in like a millisecond, and especially young people as well, whether it's a sponsored content or original authentic content. So I think advertisers are trying to move towards more authentic content, but they need to understand that there has to be ego. There has to be one person's really interesting thing. I think I just saw McDonald's Twitter post a tweet, and it just said like, I don't know if it's an error or not, but it just had like tons of O's, just like oh on it, and like there's like 40,000 likes on it. And so like that's interesting, right? Like it's funny as human beings. And I think those things speak to us. So I think virtual humans needs to have more ego if a brand or company's trying to make it, or it's just going to be a generic, boring content. So yeah, I think there's future in there, as long as we can make something that's creative and just fun. That's the most important part. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to put this question to you, Violaine. We all know that there was a point in time when clothing was once designed only for our physical selves. Then it became designed for physical humans who were digitally native. But now we're looking at digital clothing for digital humans. What do you think this means for the fashion system at large? We've already seen a lot of fashion houses begin to move into this area, but what are the possible implications, do you think, the evolution of Web3 will have for luxury brands and this idea of luxury itself?
So first off, I think it's really just the beginning. As you may know, we launched the avatar marketplace at Meta with 3 luxury brands, with Prada, Balenciaga, and Thom Browne. And it was really, for us, a great way, even if it's still, we launched it in 4 countries, now it's in 7 countries, so it's not rolled out everywhere. But it was very important to us to launch this marketplace with global famous high brands like the 3 brands that I mentioned, because we knew that people would and our users would be really excited in order to really try to dress their avatar, and it's a way to express yourself. So first, I think it's a great appeal for fashion brands, because they get also to speak to new consumers, to new audiences. We all know that luxury brands have been a lot into gaming, for several years now. I don't know if you remember that Balenciaga, again, they had their fashion show in VR. They were the first. Louis Vuitton partner with League of Legends. They do this, virtual skin, but also collab, in physical collection. So I think it's very interesting to see the links in between brands, be it luxury or fashion brands, and the fact that they want to speak to an audience. And if I can say something that is really relate to myself, when I was young, for instance, to have a carré Hermès would be a great way to really enter and get a first connection with Hermès. So you would have, when you were 18, this gift, to have a carré, and it was like, and I think that, if you look at younger generation now, they are much more connected, much more digital. And if they are able to, buy their first carré, or I don't know, anything like a very nice accessory. It's also a way to, get a nice connection with this brand. So I really believe that, to me, it's endless. And we also know that for the logistic part, so I would say like, prototype or anything, you don't need to create a prototype. You can just have like this virtual prototype. And if you see that a lot of consumers like it, then you are able to produce it without having to produce the prototype in itself. So really, to me, it's endless. And again, I think we build for people, and we'll see how people will use all those tools. And it will, brands then will follow up and businesses will follow up, exactly as Sarah said, I think it was really interesting to think that, brands, they want to have a virtual presence, but there's a lot of questions behind that. But I would say that it's more like we have a lot of opportunities. Let's see where, how people uses all those tools, uses all those elements, and what they expect from businesses, brands, or from a lot of people.
Thank you. I think that's a great note to end the panel on. And I just want to say thank you so much to you all for joining. It's been so interesting, and it's such an exciting kind of area that I think, there's so much to explore and discover. So I'm going to pass back now to Enrique to close the discussion. But again, thank you very much.
Thank you everyone for joining our panel today, and a special thanks again to our moderator, Bethany, and speakers, Violin, Sarah, David, Greg. We would also like to thank our media partner, Vogue Philippines, and CFS Hub partner, Caring, our retail partner, Gallery Lafayette, and community partners, Amex and Meta. We look forward to keeping this discourse alive through the duration of CFS Summit 2022 and throughout the year with CFS programming. You can visit our newly launched CFS page at cfs.fashion for more news, insights, and analysis on topics like digital humans and more.